Hello everyone. In this video, I will be discussing a very important topic in practical chemistry, qualitative analysis of acid radicals, that is, the identification of anions and polyanions. In the next video, we will continue this journey and cover the qualitative analysis of basic radical. Let us begin with a quick understanding of chemical analysis. So, what exactly is it? Basically, chemical analysis is the process of determining the composition of a substance. Let us take an example. Imagine a geologist has discovered an unknown mineral sample. Their very first question would be what elements are present in this sample and in what proportion. To answer such question, chemical analysis is performed. It can be broadly classified into two types: qualitative analysis, which is all about identifying the radical present, whether acidic or basic, in an inorganic salt. Second one is quantitative analysis, is about estimating the amount of those element or ions. Usually, qualitative analysis is performed first to identify what is there in the sample. Once the radicals are identified, quantitative analysis follows to determine how much of each is present. Some common examples of qualitative analysis include flame test, color chain test, precipitation reaction. For quantitative analysis, we commonly use gravimetric analysis and volumetric analysis. And there are also advanced techniques like chromatography, spectrophotometry, which can be used for both types of analysis. Let us now define what we means by radical. A radical can be an atom or group of atoms that carry either positive or negative charges. So depending upon the charge it carries, it can be further classified as an acid radical or basic radical. If a radicals carry a negative charge, it is referred to as an acid radical. For example, this can include anions such as chloride, sulfide, or polyanions like nitrate, sulfate. On the other hand, if a radical carry a positive charge, it is known as basic radical. Example of these include cations like potassium, calcium, or polycations such as ammonium. Now let us focus back on qualitative analysis of acid radical. A qualitative analysis can be carried out into two scales, one at the micro level and other at the semi-micro level. Let us quickly compare the two. As shown in the table, the quantity of the unknown sample, also known as analyte, to be analyzed is between 0.1 to zero point 0.5 gram in 15 to 20 ml of the solution for micro level analysis. On the other hand, for semi-micro analysis, only 0.05 gram in about 1 ml of solution is sufficient. Thus, if the unknown sample is limited in quantity or involves hazardous chemical for detection, semi-micro analysis becomes more useful than micro analysis. Additionally, they differ in terms of apparatus and equipment used for the analysis. For example, in microanalysis, a test tube is used for testing and water bath is used for the heating the solution in the test tube. In semi-micro analysis, a semi-micro test tube known as SM tube is used for testing and a heating block is used for heating purposes. Similarly, for separating the precipitate, filtration is used at the micro level, whereas centrifugation is used at the semi-micro level. Since semi-micro analysis is cost-effective, time-efficient and releases fewer hazardous chemicals, it is widely used in common laboratories in school and colleges. In inorganic qualitative analysis, numerous procedures are employed to determine the radical present in a given substance, and the tests involved depend on the nature of the substance. All these experimental procedures are basically of two types: dry test and wet reaction. A dry test is carried out on solid sample usually at high temperatures, while at wet reaction involve dissolved sample and reagent. In a broad sense, dry tests are preliminary tests that need to be done before analyzing ions. Although these tests are not very reliable, they are certainly helpful in identifying some cations. The first test is density. If the sample is heavy, it may be a salt of lead or barium, and if the sample is light in weight, like talc powder, it may contain carbonate of bismuth, magnesium, manganese, zinc, calcium, or maybe strontium. The second test is to determine whether the sample is hygroscopic, that is moisture sensitive. If it is, then it may be a salt of nitrate, nitrites, acetate, or chlorides of magnesium, calcium, manganese, or maybe zinc. The third is color. I have provided a table outlining the possible radical based on the sample's color. If the sample is white, then the salt of chromium, nickel, iron, cobalt, manganese, and copper are absent. You can refer to the table for a quick reference of the observed color and their corresponding interference. Inorganic compounds of transition metal, except those based on D0 or D10 systems, are typically colored. These colors result from DD transition. The energy level diagram here illustrates crystal field splitting in tetrahedral, octahedral, tetragonal, and square planar complexes. The observed color is due to electronic transition of d electrons from a higher excited level to ground level, as indicated by the blue arrow. The order can also indicate the presence of certain radicals like ammonia smell suggesting ammonium salt or rotten egg smell pointing to sulfide salt. The fifth preliminary test is the flame test. When a salt of sodium, potassium, calcium, barium and strontium are treated with concentrated HCl, they form their corresponding volatile chlorides. When these chlorides are exposed to oxidizing flame of a Bunsen burner, they absorb thermal energy which excite their valence electron to higher energy levels. Since these excited levels are metastable, the electrons eventually returns to their ground state, releasing the absorbed energy as light. The wavelength of this light is specific to the type of cation. Alright, let's go through the procedure of the flame test step by step. First, you need to clean the platinum wire. You do this by repeatedly placing it concentrated HCl and heating it in a non-luminous flame until the wire no longer impacts any color to the flame. This ensures the wire is clean and won't interfere with the test. Let us briefly discuss the different types of flames you will encounter. There are 4 types in total. Flame 1, 2 and 3 are indicative of incomplete combustion, where the fuel is burning with limited oxygen. These flames are colored due to the burning of carbon monoxide, which is a product of incomplete combustion. Now the fourth flame is slightly different. It has 2 distinct zones. The first zone BC is a blue luminous flame, while the second zone AB is a non-luminous flame. The colorless zone AB is a result of a complete combustion, which means it burns at the highest temperature. This is the zone you want to work with when performing the flame test, as it ensures that the color produced by the burning of volatile chloride will be clearly visible. Now going back to the procedure, you will dip your clean platinum wire into a paste of mixture with concentrated HCl, which you will prepare on a watch glass. Once you have done that, heat the wire again in the non-luminous flame. Finally, observe the color of the flame directly. Afterward, observe the flame again through a cobalt blue glass to see the color more clearly. If the flame color appears golden yellow, it indicates sodium, pink violet potassium, brick red calcium, crimson red strontium, and apple green barium. Here I have provided a table showing the flame color observed with the naked eye and through a cobalt blue glass. Now you might be wondering, why do we use platinum wire for the flame test? Let me explain. Platinum is chemically inert, which means it doesn't react or oxidize in the high temperature of the Bunsen burner. Even at this elevated temperature, the platinum stays unaffected by free radical or acid radical or maybe a basic radical, making it stable and reliable. One of the main reasons we use platinum is that it doesn't impart any color to the flame. This is crucial because it ensures that the only color of the element being tested is visible in the flame without any interference from the material holding it. If we use a glass rod, for example, it would soften and eventually melt under the heat of the Bunsen burner flame. Other metals like iron, copper, or nickel would also introduce their own color to the flame, which would interfere with the color we are trying to absorb from the element itself. So, in short, platinum is ideal for the flame test because it is stable, doesn't react, and ensure we get clear, uncontaminated result. Let us talk about the use of cobalt blue glass in flame test. Why is it needed? In flame tests, sodium ions often contaminate the sample, producing a strong yellow flame that it may mask or hide the color produced by the other ions in the sample. When you place a piece of cobalt blue glass in front of flame, it absorbs the yellow color produced by the sodium. This allows flame color of the other substances to be seen clearly without any interference from the yellow sodium flame. Additional benefits are like using cobalt blue glass also enhances the ability to observe the full range of colors. It helps you get a more accurate and clear view of the flame color from different elements, making the test more effective. Take a look at these two images. In the second image, the yellow flame of the sodium is blocked by the cobalt blue glass, allowing the color of the other element to be clearly seen. Anion analysis. So, it is necessary to identify the acid radical first, followed by the analysis of basic radicals, because the presence of certain acid radical can cause interference. Therefore, they must be removed at the appropriate stage. These acid radicals are referred to as interfering anions such as borate, oxalate, phosphate, fluorides, etc. For example, phosphate ions and arsenic ions have a common test. They both precipitate a yellow solid when treated with solid ammonium molybdate in the presence of nitric acid. This is the list of anions identified at academic levels. Most of these acid radicals present in a mixture can be identified using preliminary tests. These preliminary tests involve the identification of volatile products obtained upon treatment with acid. The first one is test with dilute sulfuric acid. These include radicals such as carbonate, sulfide, thiosulfate, sulfide, nitrite acetate. In a clean and dry test tube, take a pinch of mixture of salts and add few drops of dilute sulfuric acid. If you observe a colorless, odorless Brix effervescence when a gas is bubbled through a freshly prepared calcium hydroxide solution and the solution turned milky, this is a sign of carbonate ion. The milkiness will disappear with continued bubbling of the gas, confirming the presence of carbonate. If there is a distinct smell of vinegar, it is likely that acetate ions are present. A colorless gas with the smell of rotten eggs is a strong indication of sulfide ion. If the gas is caused lead acetate paper to blacken, it is a confirmation of sulfide ion. If you observe a brown gas with a pungent odor and the gas turns starch iodide paper blue, it is likely that nitrite ions are present. A colorless gas with a suffocating odor of burning sulfur, which causes the acidified potassium dichromate paper to turn green, suggests the presence of either sulfite or thiosulfate ion. Let us discuss the various reactions involved in the preliminary test with dilute sulfuric acid. When you add dilute sulfuric acid to an unknown sample, salt of carbonate, acetate, sulfide, nitrite, sulfide, and thiosulfate ionize to release their radical. The carbonate ions react with acid to give Brix effervescence of carbon dioxide gas, which later react with calcium hydroxide solution to form a white precipitate of calcium carbonate. However, if you continue passing carbon dioxide gas, the milkiness disappears due to the formation of soluble calcium bicarbonate. Acetate ion react with acid to produce volatile acetic acid, which has a characteristic vinegar-like smell. Sulfide ion react with acid to produce volatile H2S gas, which also has a characteristic rotten egg smell. When these gas come into contact with filter paper moistened with lead acetate, it forms a black spot on the paper due to the formation of lead sulfide. When nitrite ions are treated with acid, they produce brown NO2, means nitrogen dioxide gas, in the final step of the reaction. When this gas interacts with filter paper moistened with starch iodide, it produces a blue spot on the paper. Both sulfite and thiosulfate ion react with acid to produce colorless, suffocating sulfur dioxide gas. When this sulfur dioxide gas is treated with filter paper moistened with potassium dichromate, it turns the paper green due to the formation of chromium sulfate. Thiosulfate ion also produce a yellowish or white turbidity of sulfur in the semi-microtube. This turbidity helps differentiate thiosulfate from sulfite. The second preliminary test is with concentrated sulfuric acid. This includes radicals such as chloride, bromide, iodide, nitrate, fluoride, and oxalate. In a clean and dry test tube, take a pinch of mixture of salt and add few drops of concentrated sulfuric acid and heat it. If you observe a colorless pungent gas that gives white fumes when a glass rod dipped in ammonia solution is brought near, it indicates the presence of chloride ion. A reddish brown pungent gas suggests the presence of bromide ion. If violet vapors are observed which condense into black flakes, then iodide ions may be present. A pungent brown fumes that become denser with the addition of copper turning indicate the presence of nitrate ion. The appearance of oily drops in a tube and a white deposit when a moistened glass rod is brought into contact with the pungent gas suggests the presence of fluoride ion. A colorless gas that turns a calcium chloride solution milky and may also burn with blue flame indicate the presence of oxalate ion. Let us discuss the various reactions involved in the preliminary test with concentrated sulfuric acid. When you add concentrated sulfuric acid to an unknown sample, salt of chloride, bromide, iodide, nitrate, fluorides and oxalate ionize to release their radicals. For example, when a chloride ion is treated with acid, it forms colorless HCl gas which have a pungent smell. When this gas comes into a contact with a glass rod moistened with ammonia solution, it produces white ammonium chloride solid on the glass rod. A bromide ion when treated with acid forms reddish brown bromine gas. Similarly, iodide ion released to form iodine gas, which has a specific violet color. Nitrate ions produce pungent brown fumes of nitrogen dioxide, which become denser with this addition of copper turning. A fluoride ion produces highly corrosive hydrofluoric gas, which immediately react with and corrode the glass of the test tube, forming silicon tetrafluoride. This later form a white precipitate of S2SiO3. An oxalate ion, when treated with acid, produces carbon monoxide gas that burns with a blue flame. Oxalate ion also turn calcium chloride solution milky due to the formation of calcium oxalate. Okay, after gathering some information about the acid radical present in a mixture of salt, their confirmation tests are performed to ascertain their presence in the given mixture. For the confirmatory test, the mixture is dissolved in water if it is water soluble, and the resulting solution is used directly for anion analysis. However, if the mixture is insoluble in water, the anions are brought into solution by preparing a sodium carbonate extract. Let us first discuss water extract. Boil 0.5 gram of mixture in 5 ml of distilled water. You must be taken into test tube. Okay, so take 0.5 gram of unknown mixture, which is approximately half a spatula in a test tube, and add 5 ml of distilled water, which is about 1/3 of the test tube. Boil it for a few minutes. If there are any insoluble solid particles, filter the solution. The filtrate is known as water extract. For sodium carbonate extract or soda extract, take 0.5 gram of the mixture and 2 gram of sodium carbonate in a china dish. Add 15 ml of distilled water and boil it over a tripod stand until its volume reduces to 2/3 of the original volume. Wash and discard the residue, and the filtrate is known as sodium carbonate extract, also known as soda extract. Now let me demonstrate with an example how soda extract work. Ferric phosphate is not water soluble, so we cannot perform a test for phosphate ion. This issue can be resolved by preparing its soda extract. The insoluble ferric phosphate reacts with sodium carbonate to form a soluble sodium phosphate, releasing free phosphate radical for detection. In short, it is better to remove all heavy metals from the mixture by extracting their anion through boiling with sodium carbonate solution. The heavy metal precipitate out as their carbonate while their anion remain in solution. The soda extract must be acidified with an acid in order to expel carbon dioxide and allow it to cool. The choice of acid depends on the acid radical to be analyzed, and of course, the acid should not contain the same radical that is being analyzed. Please make sure to follow the same sequence of tests that I am going to discuss now. Otherwise, you might detect more than 3 acid radicals in a mixture of a salt containing only 3 anions. Of course, this will lead to the detection of some incorrect radical. Confirmatory test for carbonate. Take a pinch of the mixture to the larger tube of U tube and a few drops of calcium hydroxide solution in a smaller tube of the U tube. This is the setup of U tube. Now add few drops of dilute HCl over the solid mixture and immediately cover the mouth of larger tube with your thumb. This will allow the carbon dioxide gas to move into the smaller tube containing lime water. The formation of white precipitate of calcium carbonate confirm the presence of carbonate ion in the given mixture. However, if you continue passing carbon dioxide gas, the milkiness will disappear due to the formation of soluble calcium bicarbonate. There are some additional reactions, however, these should not be used for detection of carbonate ion. Barium chloride, calcium chloride, silver nitrate form a white precipitate of their corresponding carbonate when their water extract of the mixture is treated. Confirmatory test for acetate. Take a pinch of mixture on a watch glass and add few drops of dilute HCl. A smell of vinegar indicates the possibility of acetate ion. There are two distinct confirmatory tests and you can perform either of them. In the first test, add few drops of neutral ferric chloride solution to the water extract. A brownish red color will form due to the formation of ferric acetate. Dilute the brownish red solution with water and heat it. The formation of brownish red precipitate of ferric hydroxyacetate confirm the presence of acetate ion. In the second test, take a pinch of mixture in a test tube, add 0.5 ml of ethanol and few drops of concentrated sulfuric acid and then warm the solution. A fruity odor of ester confirms the presence of acetate ion. As you can see, like carbonate, acetate also reacts with silver nitrate to form a white precipitate. This is why I mentioned that silver nitrate cannot be used for detection of carbonate ion. Confirmatory test for sulfide. Acidify the sodium carbonate extract with acetic acid and add lead acetate solution. The formation of a black precipitate of lead sulfide indicates the presence of sulfide ion. For further confirmation, take sodium carbonate extract and add few drops of sodium nitroprusside. The formation of purple color confirms the sulfide ion. Do not acidify the sodium carbonate extract as the reaction only occurs in an alkaline medium. Here are two additional reactions for theory purposes only. Cadmium acetate reacts with sulfide to form a yellow precipitate of cadmium sulfide, while silver nitrate reacts with sulfide ion to form a black precipitate of silver sulfide. Confirmatory test for phosphate. Take few drops of sodium carbonate extract, add concentrated nitric acid, and then add a pinch of solid ammonium orthomolybdate. The formation of a yellow precipitate of ammonium phosphomolybdate indicate the presence of phosphate ion. For further confirmation, take the water extract in a test tube and add few drops of cobalt nitrate solution. The formation of bluish purple precipitate confirm the phosphate ion. If arsenic is also present in the mixture, which is typically avoided in common laboratories, the test for phosphate using solid orthomolybdate must be only performed after removing arsenic. Similarly, while performing tests for basic radical, zirconium nitrate solution is used to remove phosphate ion before testing for arsenic ion. Additional reactions for phosphate ion like barium chloride produce a white precipitate, silver nitrate produce yellow precipitate, and ferric chloride produce yellowish white precipitate when their solution are treated with phosphate solution. Confirmatory test for borate. To the water extract, add 2 ml of concentrated sulfuric acid and few drops of ethanol. Heat the test tube and ignite the vapor. A green flame caused by the burning of ethoxyborate confirms the presence of borate ion. Another test for borate ion, like borate, react with HCl to produce boric acid, which form a brown colored organic complex with commonly used turmeric. Calcium chloride test for oxalate as well as for fluoride ion. Acidify the sample with acetic acid and add calcium chloride solution. The formation of a white precipitate indicates the presence of either calcium oxalate or calcium fluoride. Add dilute sulfuric acid to the white precipitate. Oxalate will dissolve to form oxalic acid, while fluoride remains insoluble. To confirm the presence of oxalate, add 1 or 2 drops of very dilute potassium permanganate solution to the filtrate. If the pink color of potassium permanganate is discharged, then oxalate is there. For fluoride confirmation, add zirconium nitrate solution and alizarin S solution to the residue. The formation of yellow color confirms the presence of fluoride ion. Silver nitrate test for chloride, bromide, iodide, and as well as for thiosulfate. Acidify the sodium carbonate extract with dilute sulfuric acid and add silver nitrate solution. The formation of a white precipitate soluble in ammonium hydroxide indicates the presence of chloride ion. A pale yellow precipitate partially soluble in ammonium hydroxide indicates bromide ion, and a yellow precipitate insoluble in ammonium hydroxide indicates iodide ion. A formation of white precipitate which changes to black precipitate indicates the presence of thiosulfate ions. The halide ion upon treatment with silver nitrate solution form their corresponding silver halide, which later form a complex when treated with ammonium hydroxide. The solubility of the complex depends on the solubility product of their silver halides. As seen in the table, the solubility of silver halide decreases from fluoride to iodide. Consequently, the complex of chloride is soluble, whereas the complex of iodide is insoluble. Since the silver fluoride is soluble, fluoride cannot be analyzed using silver nitrate solution. Regarding thiosulfate, it reacts with silver nitrate to form a white precipitate of silver thiosulfate, which later decomposes to form a black precipitate of silver sulfide. Chromyl chloride test for the confirmation of chloride ions. Take a small pinch of an unknown solid mixture and a small amount of sodium potassium dichromate. Place them in a tube A of the U tube. In tube B, add few drops of sodium hydroxide, acetic acid and lead acetate. Carefully add a few drops of concentrated sulfuric acid to the tube A and immediately cover the mouth of tube A and slowly warm the tube A. As the reaction occurs, a red colored gas, chromyl chloride, which is CrO2Cl2, will form. Allow the red vapors of chromyl chloride gas to pass into tube B. This will result in the formation of yellow colored solution. The yellow color is due to the formation of sodium chromate. In the tube B, the sodium chromate reacts with lead acetate to form a yellow precipitate of lead chromate. This test should be performed when bromide is absent. Moreover, the covalent compound like mercury chloride do not give this chromyl chloride test. Layer test for bromide and iodide. Acidify the solution of sodium carbonate extract with dilute nitric acid. Add 1 ml of carbon tetrachloride or chloroform, whichever is available, and 2 ml of potassium permanganate solution. Shake the mixture and allow it to rest for some time. An orange organic layer confirms the presence of bromide ions, and violet orange layer confirms the presence of iodide ion. CCl4 is used to solubilize the halide gases. Diphenylamine test for nitrate and nitrite. Acidify the solution of sodium carbonate extract with dilute sulfuric acid and add few drops of diphenylamine. The formation of a blue color indicates the presence of either nitrate or nitrite ions. Diphenylamine is oxidized to form diphenylbenzidine, which is blue in color. Next, take a drops of water extract on a group tile and add few drops of alpha naphthylamine and sulfa-anodic acid. The formation of red color confirms the presence of nitrite ions. If the red color appears only after the addition of zinc dust, it indicates the presence of nitrate ions. This is because nitrite ion react directly with sulfa-anodic acid to produce red color. However, when zinc dust is added to nitrate, it is reduced to nitrite, which then react with sulfa-anodic acid and to produce red color. Now let me discuss some individual tests for nitrate and nitrite ions. For nitrate, acidify the sodium carbonate extract solution with dilute sulfuric acid and add freshly prepared ferrous sulfate solution. Then carefully add concentrated sulfuric acid along the side of the test tube. The formation of a brown ring confirms the presence of nitrate ion. For nitrite, acidify the sodium carbonate extract solution with dilute sulfuric acid and add few drops of potassium iodide along with starch solution. The formation of blue color confirms the presence of nitrite ion. Barium chloride group test for sulfate and sulfite ion. Acidify the solution of sodium carbonate extract with dilute HCl and add barium chloride solution. The formation of a white precipitate indicates the presence of either sulfate or sulfite ion. To distinguish between them, add dilute HCl to the precipitate. If the precipitate remains insoluble, it is sulfate ion. If the precipitate gets dissolved, then add few drops of dilute potassium permanganate solution. If the color of potassium permanganate discharge, it confirms the presence of sulfite ions. Now I will end this video here. Make sure to like and subscribe if you find the content helpful. Stay tuned for our next video on basic radical. Thanks you for watching this video.